Hey everyone, before we start the show, a quick word from our sponsor, the American Nurse Association. This is a professional community that has helped us both when we were nursing students and now professional nurses. It has a ton of great resources and use for all nursing professionals.
Listen up, nurses and nursing students. Summer is here, and summer is a perfect time for you to brush up on your nursing skills. And that is exactly why the American Nurses Association is offering 25% off their courses, workshops, books, and their whole website. Use code SummerSale21 at checkout for your discount.
Go to nursingworld.org to get all the latest information there, or click the link in the description to find out about the sale. Don't forget, sale ends September 6th. You don't want to miss out.
Happy studying.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Couple Nurses episode with your hosts, Peter and Matt. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you find any value in this podcast, please give us a like, comment, hit the 5 stars. It motivates us, it ranks us higher on the algorithm, and we keep on producing this high quality content. For anything related to Couple Nurses, below the show notes, you'll find some links for couplenurses.com, wearefrontlinewarriors.com, and of course the Facebook groups that are blowing up. How you doing today, Pete?
I'm doing great, man. A special interview today. We are here with Tina Vinsant. She is the host of the Good Nurse, Bad Nurse podcast. She's also a travel nurse, CVICU nurse, and also pursuing her master's in nursing. We talk about professionalism in nursing, we talk about the S.T.E.M professions, and we talk a little bit about our lives and our future pursuits.
Let's do it.
Well, thank you, Tina. Welcome to our show, the Couple Nurses show. We get started. I know you're a travel nurse, right? Are you currently doing travel nursing? You're also pursuing your master's degree?
Yes, I'm doing travel nursing, and I'm in a little rural hospital in Middle Tennessee right now, and I'm studying to get my master's as well, very slowly.
Okay, wonderful. The only place I've been to Tennessee is I've been to Nashville, Tennessee, and I also been to Pigeon Forge. I used to have neighbors in the south suburbs of Chicago that own property at Pigeon Forge. I used to go there like every couple of years. And it was always so nice. But I know there was a fire there a few years ago, I want to say, and it burned down a lot of the cabins. So I'm not sure how the fire situation is in Tennessee now, but I know a couple of years ago it was pretty bad.
It was bad. It was sad. It's not far from where I live, maybe an hour, a little less than maybe 50 minutes. So we go to Pigeon Forge and the Gatlinburg and that whole area a couple times a year.
Yeah.
In the off season when it's not the touristy time because the traffic is so horrible. But that's where I live. And Nashville is about because I live in Knoxville. So Nashville is about 3 hours west of here. Livingston is actually kind of halfway in between here in Nashville. It's about an hour and a half from my house. That's where I am. It's a couple of hours from Nashville. So it's very, very rural.
As a travel nurse currently, are you actually driving outside of the 50-mile radius and you have a different tax home, or are you still currently living where your permanent address is?
This is my tax home where I live in Knoxville. It is well over 50 miles. So I do get the stipend. I still have to pay taxes, sort of. Sometimes I spend the night in a hotel. So, it can get a little in the weeds with the tax situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Travel nurse life.
How long have you been doing it for?
This is actually my first assignment because I've been working at UT for almost 6 years.
What made you transition to travel nursing?
Well, for one thing, the company that I work for, Trusted Health, they have sponsored our podcast for the past couple of years. And so naturally, I've been talking about it on my podcast for, and it does sound exciting. And then I've been meeting people because as I talk about it on the show, then people will email me about it, reach out, and to let me know how it's going. And my friends have used them. And so I wanted to try it. So
yeah.
I thought I would stay close to home. I didn't want to go too far.
Yeah. It's a little refreshing talking to a new travel nurse. Have you noticed any kind of like changes or any takeaways from the jump from staff to travel?
Well, so when you and I don't know, it's probably different at different hospitals, but I think it's probably pretty that much the same with most people's experiences. When I started working at this little hospital, it was literally just hit the ground running. There was no orientation. It was
Jeez.
just, I mean, I followed a nurse for a couple of days, but really there was no, like, here's a class of how to do this charting system that you've never seen before, and here's where everything is. It was just, you follow this one nurse for a couple of days, and then you're on your own. And
Right.
that,
That's a
yeah, it's kind of crazy.
yeah.
I see you're laughing and smirking, and it's so wild because at first you get so culture shocked because you're used to a orientation, and there's a nurse that shows you around, and here's a supply room, and sometimes in your situation maybe it was a contract that needed somebody that was short staff. You just like you say, hit the road, grounded running.
Yeah, looking back at our past orientation, what do we have? We had 3 days. The first day was like an in-class kind of thing, looking over your EKG rhythms and all that kind of paperwork. Second day was on unit, and then the third day was in orientation. We just started it right off the bat. So we were told like 2 or 3 days of orientation, but we only really got one. But it's not, you get used to it. We've done a few contracts already, so you kind of already know what to expect. And you have that nursing background. I'm not 100% sure what your clinical background is. I think you said CVICU, but Matt and I both did ICU, so it wasn't too hard to just kind of jump right into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you always done CVICU, or did you transition to CVICU? And do you currently do CVICU?
I started out on a progressive care unit. So I work at a level 1 trauma center here at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And so I started out on the PCU, which is a step down unit that can literally see almost any kind of patient that just have, they might be a trauma patient or a neuro patient or a cardiac patient, but they're not respiratory wise, they're not really ready to be on their regular step down floor. So they would be on PCU. It's a 3-to-1 ratio. It's a very difficult floor. I worked there for 4.5 years. I was a team leader and I really enjoyed it, but I reached a point that I was kind of wanting a new challenge, learn something new. And so I transferred to CVICU and was there for about 1.5 years. I was there. You have to be there for a while before they allow you to be heart trained for you to be able to take open hearts. And so I got heart trained at the beginning of the year, and then I kind of had been trained in all specialties other than ECMO.
Okay.
And then I thought, okay, I guess I could do this. The little hospital where I'm at now is it has a 6-bed ICU. So I am most times I'm in there by myself. It's just me.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really, so it's a different environment. It's just it's very, very different. You have to, a travel nurse told me before I went, when I told her the assignment, she said, I love the little hospital assignments. She said, I've always loved them, but she said, you do have to get creative. And I kind of see, it's just a different atmosphere. It's very, at a large teaching institution, it's a magnet institution. Nurses are treated with a lot of respect, and we have a voice there where we have shared governance. So there are lots of nursing councils, and it's definitely, there's a lot of autonomy at UT. So when you leave there and you go to this little hospital where it's just a different environment,
Yeah, it's one that we for sure notice as well. And plus you're a traveler, so you don't really know a lot of people there, and you don't really know how they have their system set up, where it's like, who do we talk to if you have an issue? Do I talk to my charge nurse, or do I talk to the ACM? You're not really sure how that works. Like, they share governance and stuff as well. But I have one more question regarding your experience. Because you said you went from a PCU to a CVICU, is a temperament and a personality of CVICUs like true to the rumors?
So Instagram is just notorious for being brutal to CVICU nurses.
Yeah.
It's funny. I didn't get to laugh about this before I moved to CV. It would have been hilarious, which is still funny, but it's so the unit where I work at UT, and I'm still PR in there. It's a 24-bed unit. It's a large unit, and it is a very challenging place to work. And I think there is a lot of humility, honestly. I think everyone respects the what they have to do there, and also a lot of us get floated to the other units. We get floated to trauma unit. We get floated to the neuro unit.
Yeah, same. Neuro is always a pain.
The medical unit, which is become COVID, the
Mm.
COVID unit, which we're not supposed to call it that, but
Right.
that's kind of what it is.
Mm.
So you kind of get a respect for everybody, and being floated all over the hospital. I think that helped prepare me for travel nursing, because travel nursing is sort of like get the ultimate float, because most people don't like getting floated, in the hospital. But I did it so much that I was like, actually, I like it. It's kind of a break from the stress of my floor. I get to meet new people, and I learned to enjoy it. So I think that gave me a little more, courage to be able to do travel nursing.
Right.
And you have your wider experience in ICU and all that. So a lot of new grads ask us whether it's okay to start off right away into the ICU and get accepted. What are your thoughts about that?
100%. I think that uh, that is. I don't. I always like to be, diplomatic. I don't like to offend anyone. Everybody has a right to their opinion. I really do
Yes.
believe that. And so I don't like to, shut someone down because of whatever their opinion is. But I firmly believe that they're very capable, very driven nurses who can handle being put to that fire and rise to the challenge. But I've seen it too many times. I know they can. So it's I know that it's possible because I've seen it, and fully capable. I don't mean that they shouldn't be there and that lives are at risk. And now I will say this, and I always tell people this, new grads, if you're going to do that, be sure you go somewhere where they're going to give you an adequate orientation, and they're not going to kick you out of the nest if you're not comfortable. So you have to go somewhere where you're going to be protected, because if you're going to go to some hospital where they throw you in the ICU and you get, a few weeks of orientation and they expect you to, no, you can't do that is dangerous for you and the patient. But if you go somewhere that gives you six, like they do at UT, 6 months of orientation, I think you can handle it. I really do.
100%.
Yeah, I think 6 months is a great time, especially for the ICU side.
Yeah, I got 3 months of my orientation, which was, I think, was enough too. Yeah, we always tell nurses to always aim to get a nursing position in a unit that you want to work in. Like professors and all the teachers always said, hey, start at med-surg, but I don't follow that route. Like, I didn't follow that route. I don't think anybody really should. I think you should go into the job that you wanted in nursing school, right? So you actually get a feel for it, because sometimes, nurses join med-surg or they hop in a unit just to get that job, and they kind of get stuck there and they don't like the unit and they're miserable. Now they got to do 3 months of orientation and then they have to stay there for like a year. Especially some of my friends, they committed to like a random unit that they just wanted to really get a job. So they committed to a random unit, and that unit offered a bonus. But that bonus was like, hey, you guys stay here for 2 years. And nurses fall into this trap of working in this unit that they didn't want just because they got offered this bonus, and then they're stuck there for 2 years, because if they leave, they got paid back. And nobody wants to pay back that bonus. Yeah. So every time somebody asks, we always say, hey, just pursue what you want to pursue. Don't waste your time if into something that you're not going to want to do long term.
Yeah. And you make just to piggyback off this, you make a good point, because I've started at med-surg, and same thing, after 8 months into my med-surg career, it became very tasky for me. I knew I was craving more. I was craving the information, the labs, and putting the picture together of how to troubleshoot and take care of this patient, which it didn't give me enough job satisfaction working med-surg.
Right. And we're not talking down on med-surg or anything like that. Like, I can't do med-surg. Like, if I get floated to med-surg, I'm always behind. Like, whoever does med-surg as a nurse, like, it's props to you. I can't handle that much patients. Yeah. If I get 3 patients, if I get more than 2 or 3 patients, like, I'm lost. Especially if they're walking, talking, moving around, wanting something, like, I don't know what to do. I like my patients, sedated, intubated. So for whoever who does med-surg, like, props, because it's hard. Yeah. To me, it's harder than ICU. On like a nursing perspective, for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
And that goes into the nursing degree, correct? So I know the federal government is not considering us as STEM, right? And that's a topic that I know you had some interest in, and I would love to chat more about that, because as a nurse, we are involved in science more than ever. And I think compared to other professions, sometimes we're on the front line troubleshooting medications, and it's almost like a science experiment at work. as crazy as that sounds, but sometimes we don't know how to treat patients like COVID, and we have to just keep continuing doing things, different treatment modalities, even proning patients. We have to come up with the algorithm in a way on how to properly prone patients, the devices, the equipment, the staff that's needed. So what are your thoughts about that the federal government hasn't considered us as STEM?
Yeah. So, boys, this is soapbox for me. I get off on this sometimes. I get on what I call Tina tangents sometimes on my podcast, and so my podcast is more storytelling, and then something like this comes up, and I just cannot stop myself. But when I came across this one day, I found an article that basically was just it was written by a nurse, and the nurse was saying, that it's not right that the nursing profession or the nursing degree is not considered STEM. And I just went, what? That's ridiculous. Of course it's STEM. How can that even be an opinion? That's not an opinion. It's a fact. There's
Right.
it's science. It's literally in the degree. So it was really confusing. And then I researched it, and I actually sent you, I wish I had sent this to you earlier. I didn't think to send it to you until just a little bit ago. So you probably haven't seen it, but there's a list, an official list that's kept by the Department of Homeland Security, which is weird. But it's all of the degrees that are considered STEM. And yeah, you can do the Control F to do find on the page and just start typing in nurse. I dare you. You're not going to find, it'll start beeping at you because it's not there. Nursing is not considered STEM as far as the United States federal government is concerned. And that affects us because there are federal grants that are given to universities for STEM degrees, for degrees that are considered STEM. And there are also other implications as well. So but just the fact that it is a science, but it's not recognized, it just sort of explains a lot, doesn't it, about how we're treated, and the lack of respect, the lack of pay. And I think that we have a long way to go. And I feel like it's a good place to start educating people about that, and maybe doing something to get that changed.
Yeah, 100%. Because nursing school isn't cheap, and if you could help somebody get some of this, federal grant money, it'll be like super beneficial for everybody, especially those low income people. And I was kind of thinking about like, why isn't nursing like a STEM, or why hasn't it been like implemented in there? And like the only thing that I could kind of think of is basically the way I see it is because nursing has been a very female dominant, not to bring sexism into this or anything like that, but nursing has been a predominantly female dominant career for a long period of time, right? And still is. Nothing wrong with that. And I feel like careers that are majority female kind of get put on a back burner, or kind of people don't really consider them. I don't want to say important, but you know how things were back in the day, where women didn't have as much rights as men. The whole thing, the whole push for women rights and all that. I think this is still lagging with that. That's my opinion. And as well as nursing has been viewed as less of a profession and more of like taking care of people. A lot of people still view nursing as not as professional. A lot of people view it just as almost like a caretaker, but it's not what it really is about.
I think the general public they're not quite, they don't see the big picture of what we do as nurses. They think it's probably something just like you say, like a caregiver position, but we're doing so much, whether it's pharmaceutical medications we're giving out, administering things, diluting medications, mixing them, figuring out what parameters we should be giving a medication because it could tank somebody's blood pressure. Yeah. We're doing so much science, and to be not considered that's very baffling.
Yeah, like school-wise, what do we take? We take microbiome, we take, anatomy and physiology twice, and plus all the other prerequisites that we got to take. It's literally all science. So I'm like, I was trying to figure out why isn't this still not a STEM, and I can't really figure it out. I'm not sure if it's like a monetary issue. I'm not sure if there's like some kind of a governing body that is not pushing for nursing to be a STEM because maybe some regulations, or maybe there's going to have to pay out something. I don't know. I couldn't really figure it out. The only thing that makes sense to me was because it's been a female dominant career, and female dominant careers usually take longer to kind of normalize into these kind of things. And that's basically it, Yeah, I can't really think of like any really valid reason of why this is not a STEM.
Well, I think for one thing that nurses we get in our own way, and we have for a long time. So are you familiar with NANDA? the nursing
And
diagnosis handbook. Are you
yes.
familiar with that? Have you ever looked through some of the nursing diagnoses? I mean, do any of them sound scientific to you? Have you ever heard of altered energy field and all of this nonsense that's in that book? I'm sorry, but I know that's probably controversial, but it's just that like I said, sometimes I think we get in our own way, and we don't have to have all of those complicated, overwritten nursing diagnoses that you have to sit there and read over and over again. I was trying to read them to my husband the other day. I was like, "Could you look?" Because where am I? I'm in school trying to get my master's degree, so I'm back in Nanda HE double
Back
hockey
at
sticks
it.
again, and so I'm just going, "Oh, it's so frustrating because this isn't what we do. This is not what we do. I don't sit there thinking about someone's energy field when I don't know. I think that there needs to be an overhaul of the whole profession, and I don't know. We're gonna have to start rebuilding from the ground up.
Yeah, we have to. Right? It's got to change somewhere. You know,
you make a good point, because even last year during the whole pandemic, we were flagged as heroes, and we're the poster child for the great war that we're fighting, right? Yet nothing really changed when it comes to hospital institutions. I know there was like some hazard pay, and they gave us a ton of food. I mean, I gained weight, right?
Yeah.
So that was all great. But now, let's just say COVID slowed down in the summer months and everything went back to normal, and no one really talks about us. Maybe, we don't implement any policies, even nurse patient ratio. How come that's not done? What's up with the lobbying money behind all that? That, for example, Illinois tried to pass that a few years ago. It got shut down by the American Hospital Association, and they told them that hospitals can't afford nurses to have ratios.
And that's mind blowing, because remember when we looked into how much money the hospital that you used to work for makes? It makes billions of dollars, and only about like 5% of the total revenue was for nurses. So we basically, because on the internet it showed us how much this hospital makes in revenue and how much nurses it employs. So we basically did the math, multiplied the amount of nurses times the average nursing salary, and it only ended up being like 5% of the total hospital revenue. And it's mind blowing, because people always say, hey, there's not enough money for ratios, not enough money for this, not enough money for that. But somehow COVID happened and we had all this money. And then we started doing this math and saying, how are you going to say that there's not enough money if only 5% of your total revenue is allocated to nurses? Of course, there's other staff and other things to do in the hospital, but there's also these CEOs and presidents and vice presidents that are getting paid millions and millions of dollars. So how does that make any kind of sense? And that's just like this crazy, this is where we bring up where we need to change something. Someone's got to change. These fundamentals are somewhere flawed, and someone has to step up and change it, because it's not being done. It's being swept under the rug.
Yeah. And I personally feel, with the amount of things that are happening in our world, I don't think much will change unless people like us start getting together and acknowledging this problem, whether it's multiple nursing podcasts or a few communities, and we could get together to say something to our government, because that's the only way things are going to be changed.
Yeah. And like, it takes even like small steps, like, maybe becoming a STEM career might not do this drastic change, but just being on that list might open up more eyes to nursing,
Innovation.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into the topic of, our nurses being treated like professionals or labor jobs. And working an hourly job, it kind of makes you feel like that you're just doing some kind of labor. I think what blew my mind the most is, this was 3 months ago. We were working in California. They're very strict on overtime. They're double time and everything. You come to work trying to take care of a patient, and they try to get you off the clock, because if you go 3 minutes over, they're going to pay you double time. And God forbid a nurse makes a little bit more money for taking care of a human being.
Yeah.
And that bothers me so much, where you want to do your job, and as a nurse you came for this good compassion and I want to help people, and then you have the top management just pushing the business model, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it makes you lose your sense of power as a nurse.
Yeah. What do you think, Tina? Do you think, like, how could we make nursing be viewed as a more professional environment? Would it be a salary position be better? Like, what do you think on that?
I do think that having nurses come in and clock out, being paid hourly, it it you are sort of, you think about other positions. Most professions do not clock in and clock out. You're paid a salary, and might I add that if you are whatever you're worth is what you should be paid. So if nurses will say something like, oh, well, I won't be able to work overtime. What if I want to work more? You should be paid what you're worth. So you shouldn't have to work overtime in order to make the amount of money that you should be making as a nurse. And what nurses are having to do is, number one, they are having to pick up extra shifts just to make the amount of money that you should be making, in a on a yearly basis. So if you average it all out, with the overtime that you're getting, the extra shifts that you're picking up, maybe instead of making 60,000 a year, you're making 70 or 80,000 a year, depending on what state you live in.
Mhm.
And so you shouldn't have to, if you're worth 80,000, you should be paid 80,000 for working a full-time job, for working 40 hours a week, whatever that looks like. And if the hospital is desperate enough and they need more people to work other days, they will pay you a bonus. You can get paid a bonus, just like other salaried positions get paid bonuses for different things. I do believe that it is important for nurses to, rather than be treated like you're an hourly worker. I mean, you can't how many times have I heard nurses in this area where I am working right now saying I could go to a fast food place and get paid more money, and they can, unfortunately.
Wow.
And yeah, there are certain
Wow.
certain areas. So I think fundamentally that nurses pay, the whole thing needs to change. Like, rather than because there also, another thing that happens is nurses will go to registry or go to the float pool, go to PRN status, because the hospitals will pay you
Like 5 more
10
bucks.
$15 an hour more. You go from making $26 an hour to making $36 an hour. And but guess what? You don't get PTO, you don't get sick time, you don't get any kind of benefits, you don't get insurance. Working in that situation, I literally just had this conversation with someone who said, oh, I don't have insurance. She needs to have surgery. She said, oh, I don't have insurance. And then and it was a doctor, was talking to her, and he goes, why don't you have you work here? And she said, oh yeah, but I'm PRN. I had to go PRN in order to be able to make enough money to live.
Damn.
So you see, this is how we are treated. We're not treated with the respect. We're not treated like professionals. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy. And on like the other spectrum, we can't do it to ourselves sometimes, just because we went to nursing because we're compassionate, we want to help people, and a lot of times we don't know how to help ourselves, and a lot of times we let people push us around because, hey, it's all in the best interest of the patient, right? If I don't work this overtime, we might not have enough nurses to take care of this patient, or we might have a nurse that's going to come float and not do a proper job. So we do this to ourselves. But I believe this whole salary situation would be definitely very beneficial, because not only can the hospital better gauge how much money they're going to spend on nurses, because nurses are probably not going to be as inclined to pick up overtime, you could say, but I feel like it would push for better staffing, because a lot of nurses, like you said, are reliant on picking up overtime to make a little bit more, or make just enough for them to survive and live happily. So it's almost like we're being forced to work overtime, because if you're telling me I can make like 60K regular working my hours, but I can make 70K 80K by working extra overtime, people are going to be more inclined to work the overtime. But in the long run, you're doing more harm than good, instead of getting paid straight up that 70 right in between, right? And then same with, like, if I'm getting paid better, I'm more inclined to kind of do things for free, almost, you could say, because I know I'm being like compensated fairly, right? So I might be able to stay a few minutes after without telling anybody or telling a manager. I might just do it just out of generosity.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, is there a corporate agenda for the healthcare system to not want staff nurses because of 401ks, all the benefits and all that? Why not just force nurses, by not paying them enough of staff nurses, into going into PRN travel nursing? Then the hospital doesn't have to fund all these nurses, and now it's just like a freelance company where nurses come. Because I feel like travel nursing is almost like freelance. You come in there as a freelancer, you work, and then you leave, no strings attached. I feel like that's the business model they're going for, almost, because it's easier for the hospitals.
Right.
But that's just a conspiracy.
Yeah, but at least you get the insurance, health insurance, and a 401k from your travel agency, compared to a nurse working PRN or as needed, where she doesn't have anything. Yeah, she gets paid more, and she has 2 or 3 PRN jobs. But guess what? Insurance is a lot more expensive if you're going solo compared to going through an employer. So are you really benefiting if your insurance is going to be more expensive? I mean, you might not necessarily be benefiting, because you got to buy your own insurance, right? I'm guessing, or do you get it through your travel agency?
So I have insurance through my husband, but
Okay.
I work for Trusted Health. So I'm actually an employee of I work for them. They have benefits. I get sick time. I'm accruing sick time as I work, and then I can schedule myself to be off, and I just sort of build that in because I basically make almost twice what I was making at the hospital where I was working. So you can afford to build in some off time, and take a couple of weeks off before the next assignment. So it really is amazing. I really do. I'm really enjoying it.
It kind of makes you feel like you are your own boss in a way, and you
Mhm.
didn't have that autonomy being a staff nurse. So we talk about all this about pros and cons of hourly salary. What was your reason for leaving staff nursing? Was it this, dichotomy of not being treated fairly as a staff nurse, deserving more, and you pursued a travel, or was it just more about the time and place for you right now?
Well, um, I was at the time right when I stopped working there or went to PRN and started working for Trusted. I was working weekend, what they call weekend registry. So I worked every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because it pays an additional $10 an hour.
Oh.
So, but you have to work almost every single weekend. You get very few exceptions to that. So it just hit me. Oh, and there is no benefit. There is no PTO. There is no sick time. If I couldn't be at work, I just wasn't at work. I just didn't get paid. So it does feel like kind of a slap in the face. It's like, oh, if you want to get paid, and then it's not that much money. It's still not that much money. I still don't feel like it's what nurses should be getting paid.
Yeah.
But it's like if we're going to pay you this much money, it's to them, then you don't deserve any PTO or sick time or insurance or whatever. So yeah, I did start kind of looking around and going, you mean I can make this much more and kind of and it's nice because when, go into another hospital, and I don't know how it's going to be other places, who knows, but um, my personality, I sort of just blend in and are quiet at first and just sort of do my job. And then slowly you sort of prove yourself as people kind of catch on and see, oh, so you know how to do this, and oh, where do you work? And then they'll start asking questions. And before you know it, like I just feel like I can have something to offer them. I can be helpful to them because they are in a more rural, small regional hospital where they don't get to see the types of patients, that are at a larger hospital. And so occasionally something comes along and there's a port that they need to access and they've never seen that before. So
Wow.
I know how to do that. I can do that. I can show you how to do that. Absolutely. Or a PCA pump or just things that we take for granted because we use them all the time. And if you're a nurse in a little hospital and all of a sudden doctor orders something like that, or someone comes along and you're just like, oh, I've never, because look, there's a lot of new nurses in these little hospitals because experienced nurses don't stick around very long because they're not getting treated well either. So yeah, it can be kind of fun, to just go to different places and make friends, and I don't know, feel like you're making a difference and meeting different kinds of people.
Yeah.
Exactly. And plus your wide variety of skill sets, you could also not only help patients, but also the unit itself, or maybe see how they could implement things better. And that's what's so cool about travel nursing is you have that wide variety of experience. You could just showcase it to them and kind of feel good about it.
Yeah. And no commitment. Like that's really a really good thing too, because I love my home unit where I worked in Chicago, and I left because just of higher pay, but it was a really good work experience. But I know some nurses, especially new grads or even nurses that have like a year or two experience, they jump on in a unit and you don't really understand the unit up until maybe like, I want to say a month or 2 months in, right? So sometimes staffers get stuck at a job they don't like because in the beginning, oh, it was all nice, it was good, everyone's good communicating, but then you start to get to know people, you're like, damn, this environment's pretty toxic. I wish I never started here. Travel nursing prevents that, you could say, because you're only going to be there for 13 weeks. So if you're 2 weeks in and your job sucks on a unit, well, guess what? You only have 9 more weeks left, and then you can never come back. Or if you're there 2 weeks, you technically have 11 more weeks to go. But you can never, you don't have to come back if you don't want to. So that's the beauty of it too. It gives you that freedom. It's like Matt said, it's almost like your own boss. If you don't like a hospital, if you don't like a unit, You don't got to come there ever again. And there is times where people will cut their contract short just because it's so toxic. And that's okay to do too. Like if we're in a bad work environment or your license is in jeopardy or you don't feel safe, like cut your travel nursing contract early. Don't risk your license over a job that you don't like.
Agreed. And I know you also have the Good Nurse, Bad Nurse podcast. How is your experience being a full-time nurse? I'm not sure if you have kids in a family, but that might be an extra load on you. And how do you juggle that? And what kind of sparked your interest into getting into podcasting?
I just several years ago, I had been a nurse for about 2 or 3 years at that point. And I was feeling bad. I was kind of feeling guilty because there was a time right when I got off orientation and was working that I was very stressed out. And I honestly thought I made a mistake becoming a nurse. I was just like, wow, this is so incredibly hard. I can't, and it hit me one day when I was walking. I tell this story all the time. When I was walking down the hall and someone said to me, Tina, you live in the dream. And I was like, and he goes, well, you are, aren't you? And I was like, what? And he goes, didn't you dream of being a nurse? And I was like, oh my gosh, I did dream this. Oh, and it just hit me like, why did I dream this? Why I'm in a nightmare? And I was miserable and I kind of complained a lot. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe how hard it is. I can't believe how people treat you. A lot of it was the way other nurses, that whole interaction at handoff. I hated that time. I hated it so much. It was so toxic. It was so, I just, I don't know. I left feeling like a horrible person because I beat myself up. I'm bad about doing that. I'm kind of a perfectionist, especially when it comes to my job. And one little thing, and I would just like think about it all night, that I couldn't believe I did that or made that mistake, or I didn't know that I was supposed to know it. Well, a couple of years into it, and all of a sudden, I just realized that I wasn't dreading going to work. I wasn't looking forward to going to work. I missed work when I wasn't there after, for a few days. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I like nursing. I love nursing. I love being a nurse. And I got so excited and then a little sad that I'm pretty sure I ran some people off of the profession because I was like, run as fast as you can. Don't do it, So actually starting the podcast was my way of kind of getting my voice out there and telling new grads and nursing students, like, it's going to be hard at first for most people. So if you stick it out, you actually may love it. And I think that I help some people because I hear from people all the time that love it, love hearing that sort of thing, because they're like, I'm so stressed out right now. I feel that way. So when I hear you say that, it makes me think, it's going to be okay.
It definitely takes some time for nursing to grow on you, because you come out of nursing school, you're a new grad, super stressed, don't know what to do, freaking out, and then you kind of progress into like the way you were feeling, as in still kind of stressed, but more tired from the workload. And then, workloads kind of gets easier over time. And then a few years down the line, you realize, hey, nursing is an awesome profession. You're just kind of looking at it the wrong way. But I wish people would come to that realization sooner than later. But given the ratios and the work environment and the unit toxicity, sometimes it takes a little bit of time and takes a few tries to finally realize, hey, nursing, I actually enjoy nursing. Because there's definitely been some times in my life where I was like, why the hell did I become a nurse? Like, this is like the fourth diarrhea that I'm cleaning up, and I'm only like 3 hours into my shift. Yeah. Like, of all the things I could have done, I decided to wipe ass for a living, Yeah. Sometimes you get that feeling, but then like you have really good moments of patients sharing stories with you, and family coming in, giving you recognition and all that, and then like your heart melts. You're just like, yeah, this feels good. This was worth it. That shit I had to wipe last week, I'm over it. This week was a lot better, and I actually really like nursing. This takes time.
It definitely does. There's something exciting about nursing too, and every single day you wake up and you just don't know what the unknown is going to bring. It's almost like the universe in a way. Just you go to a shift and you just put on your poker face and you're ready to just take as much hits as you can. And I think that just develops grit and perseverance to anything else you want to do in life. And that's why I feel like nursing is an awesome job, where maybe you love medicine, but you don't love, let's say you love helping people, but you don't love medicine necessarily. When it's nursing, you could always branch off and try to take a different route and help people through your career and your experience, what you can do with
Yeah.
that.
On a personal perspective, I think the unit makes or breaks nursing. I think the unit, like how cohesive that is and how well the communications and teamwork, I think that's probably the most important, because you can have a high workload and a very stressful time, but if you have a good nursing team and a good nursing squad that helps you with stuff, it makes the day and the night go by so much better. And of course, we would ideally prefer less workloads and better patient ratios, but sometimes during those tough times, a good unit compensates for the unit lacking the ratios and the workload.
Yeah.
You know?
Not to mention also, I feel like older nurses, instead of being warming, they give you kind of a warm welcoming, and this is how the unit is, this is how things are. They're very negative in a way too, and they're very pessimistic in their profession. So this whole nurses eat their young, it's also the way they kind of transfer onto the new people. They kind of tell us like, hey, this job's gonna suck. It's almost like your first day, you're putting your backpack in school, like, damn, this is gonna be a hard semester. You know, it's almost how like I see nursing as, because they don't tell us the compassion part and how exciting it is, just like you guys mentioned.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, recently physicians were switched from physician assistants to associates. And I was wondering what your guys' viewpoints are on that. One thing that I found interesting about COVID when I worked last year is in the ICU, we had nurses that were helping us bring supplies, and they were called runners at first. So we used runners as a term. And I think 6 months into it, they got offended that we're using that word, and we had to switch to nurse extenders. I personally didn't think of anything. We're still a team. We're still doing nursing together. We're helping patients at the end of the day. But that was a little bit of a thing I remember on the unit, that they didn't like to be called that way.
I remember that as well.
So what are your thoughts about that change from assistant to associate?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there is a lot in a name, and it can make you feel, a certain kind of way, to be just referred to as, a runner or, um, and so I think that if people are speaking up and saying, okay, this is kind of making me feel like I'm not respected, I think we should respect that. And, you know, it's not hard to change a name. So if it helps someone to feel more included and more respected, and it kind of helps them feel more part of the team, like they're not just, a pair of legs that can run around. Um, I think that it's an easy fix, to help a part of the team to feel better about themselves. And, that's so easy, like just do it, change it. The physician assistant thing, I totally get it. I really do. I think that PAs definitely have struggled over the years with just a lack of understanding of what their role is, and their part of that probably is in the name physician assistant. It sounds like an assistant to the physician, and as opposed to what they are, or a physician's assistant is what um, a lot of people will say. A physician's assistant, as if they are the physician's assistant, and as opposed to their actual role, and that is a provider, an actual provider of medicine that can prescribe and diagnose, and a part of the medical team. Um, so if that makes them feel like they are more respected, and like it helps to explain to the world better what they do and what their role is, then I say that's great for them.
Yeah, 100%. I'm on the same boat with you. Like, to me, I don't get very attached to names, but if it makes somebody feel better to be called, physician associate, a physician assistant, more power to them. Like you said, it's an easy fix, right?
Yeah.
It's an easy fix in society. And the whole like nurse practitioner route, I feel like maybe you could come up with a better name for nurse practitioner. I feel like when you say nurse practitioner to people that aren't in medicine or aren't in nursing, they view nurse practitioner as like maybe a title a little bit higher than a nurse. But a nurse practitioner can technically practice on her own as well. I'm not sure how
Very
you
close
feel
to being
toward
a physician
yeah.
associate.
I'm not sure you feel towards that name, physician assistant, or not physician assistant, but nurse practitioner.
I think that that's another one that's very controversial. I think that nurse practitioner is an unfortunate term and a title for them, because, like you said, it almost seems like just an extension of nursing. And you can go, do you know you can be a nurse practitioner and never have stepped a day on the floor as a nurse? You can never even, you can be a nurse practitioner without even having an RN, which is
Wow.
interesting because I have
Yeah.
a friend who's a EMT,
Mm.
paramedic. Sorry, she was a paramedic, and she went with her from being a paramedic to being an NP. So I I do think that having the word nurse in there kind of throws some patients maybe, and
Mm.
maybe patients are thinking, well, you're just a nurse. You're not, why are you diagnosing me and prescribing me medications? Also, I think there's a little confusion with some people as far as like LPNs versus,
That's
because
true.
licensed practical nurse is very close to nurse practitioner. And
Mm.
so, it is confusing. I think that there's maybe some room there to talk about whether or not, and I'm not a nurse practitioner and don't want to be, but I'm an advocate for them. I went to the to Congress a little over a year and a half ago before COVID, and talked to my senator and Congress people about full practice authority in the state of Tennessee, because nurse practitioners do not have full practice authority in the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
They have they have a lot, but it's not full. So they do have to have a physician overseeing their practice.
Mhm.
So I think there's something to be said for it myself.
Yeah, because for sure, because I had a few patients that because I worked in like a heart failure unit, and there's a few times where I overheard a patient say to a nurse practitioner saying that I want to speak to my doctor, just a nurse, you know what you're talking about. And
Mhm.
nurse practitioner like you've been coming to my heart failure clinic every month basically, and now you don't value my opinion and you want to see the doctor. Like I feel like a lot of people in society don't understand the difference between nurse practitioner, LPN, and an RN. I feel like they just think it's just like one thing where one maybe has a little bit more power than the other. But like you said, we're not nurse practitioners. If nurse practitioners are okay with them being called nurse practitioners, I'm okay with it too. But if they want to push for something else, like I'm completely open to it. Because a nurse practitioner could do a lot. Only thing I think the difference between like an NP and a PA is what I think surgery is the main difference, if I'm not mistaken.
That I don't know.
I'm not sure if you know, Tina, or not. The main difference is between an NP and a PA.
It depends on the state.
Yeah,
It varies state to state, but some states, yeah, so nurse practitioners can do some surgical procedures. And some states, they can literally work completely autonomously. They don't have to have the oversight of a physician. They can open their own clinic and
Yeah.
practice, medicine. I just think that there's a misunderstanding of what they do and their level of education. Now, one thing I will say, there is some concern that there should be required residency. So that could be a problem. If you have for example, I have a friend who went through and got her bachelor degree in nursing, never stepped a day on the floor, and went straight into nurse practitioner school and got her FNP, and just started working as a nurse practitioner. And when working as a nurse myself, without having the clinical experience that I have, there's so much that I would not know. And those 2 years of nurse practitioner school, I'm not sure equal what you need to be able to really understand at the cellular level to be able to diagnose and really, know your job really well. So I feel like there needs to be a really good residency program for requirements for PAs and nurse practitioners to make sure they're getting that experience, with another nurse practitioner. I don't think they have to be under a physician.
Mm.
They're totally experienced. There are plenty of experienced nurse practitioners and PAs who could run physicians under the table with their knowledge and their level, their skill and their experience. But that it all depends on how much they've invested, and so.
Yeah, definitely. Like for professions that want to be viewed more as like professionals, you could say there's the big proponent to this, or big component to this, is definitely the clinical side and the education side. Because if you're going to push for a more professional look on yourself and your title, you have to make sure that everybody gets proper education, right? Because that's going to be detrimental if you're going to try and push for hey, let's try to change this NP name to something different, or let's try to be looked at as more professionals, and you have a lack of education and a clinical background, that just decreases your validity to being more professional. It's very important. If you want to be considered more professional, then the school component has to be there, because there can't be a difference. It can't be a big difference from one school to another, where if you go to one school, you get a better education, better clinical experience, and you know more compared to another university, right? If you have a giant gap in education like that, no one's ever going to view a professional more professionally, because there's this giant gap and there's no standard, right? It has to be held to a certain level, and then we could all push for this, right? Because if, like you said, if for NP school you don't have much clinical experience and you haven't been a nurse, then how are you going to really truly be able to diagnose somebody if you're not as prepared as, say, the PA or even a nurse that has that, or even an NP that it's been to nursing school and has worked as a nurse for 2 years. I know majority of nurses do try to work like 2 years somewhere just to gain that background, but not everybody does. Like I do know a nurse that went like you went basically from nursing school to an NP. Like she never did any kind of work as a nurse. Yeah, wow. Just went through school. And that shows when they interact with patients. That shows when they kind of critically think certain situations, because they haven't experienced that stressful situation in a hospital or stressful situation working at a clinic somewhere, because they've never been through it, and it shows.
I think a good example is the CRNA programs. They're all standardized now. Some of people still got grandfathered in for the master's degree, but a lot of it is doctorate.
Yeah.
So now it's, as a profession, it's standard. You're almost, you're practicing anesthesia, and it just shows how it looks, right? In a way.
100%.
Yeah. So, we enjoyed this conversation. We're kind of approaching our time here. Thank you for being with us here for your time. And if anybody wants to listen to Tina, check her out. She actually has a podcast called the Good Nurse, Bad Nurse Podcast. It's on Spotify and Apple and all the good platforms. And she's also on Instagram, Good Nurse, Bad Nurse, and on Facebook and on Twitter, GNBN Podcast. And she also has a website, goodnursebadnurse.com. Thank you, Tina, for your time. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.